As the room buzzed with anticipation, Minister of Defense Andrei Romovich Belousov stepped in, commanding the attention of all. His presence was electric, unsettling the usual decorum of the government chamber. While German Graf excitedly launched into a presentation on the digital ruble, Belousov's piercing gaze took in the scene. Graf's confidence radiated as he proclaimed the virtues of direct payments for pensioners, likening it to cutting-edge technology. Transitioning to this new model is essential, Graf urged, his gestures animated, capturing the audience's interest. Valentina Matvienko enthusiastically nodded along, her expressions mirroring the performative nature of the discussion. When Graf cited China as a success story of digital modernization, Matvienko's eyes glittered with approval. "Look at China," Graf proclaimed. "The elderly are satisfied, and the nation thrives." Laughter erupted in the room, dismissing any concerns with light-hearted banter. Yet, outside those walls, reality loomed harshly. Belousov observed the carefree atmosphere with mounting irritation. He grasped economics with unparalleled clarity. However, after months overseeing the Ministry of Defense, he grasped something deeper. War is not about digits, it's about lives, soldiers, officers, families. Those he met in hospitals and elders awaiting humanitarian aid had stories, not charts. Rising deliberately, he clasped his hands in front of him. The room fell silent, the laughter stifled. His authoritative demeanor broke through the tension as he declared, "Enough." The air felt heavy. The sound of the air conditioning a reminder of the pressure in the room. "Valentina Ivanovna, German Oscarovich," he began coolly, "you rave about digitalization and progress. But let me ask you this." He paused, letting anticipation build. "In China, they impose the death penalty for corruption. Families are charged for bullets to execute their loved ones. Is that what you aspire to?" Each word landed with precision, resonating emotionally as those present felt the shift in their complacency. The atmosphere which once thrived on lightheartedness now quivered under the weight of harsh truths. His thoughtful critique pierced through the political jargon. Silence enveloped the chamber after his unyielding questions, revealing an unwillingness to confront the stark reality. Recognizing the gravity of the moment, Belousov continued, "Before we push digital currencies, let's tackle something vital, the basic infrastructure. There are villages without reliable internet. How can we expect our elders to navigate this digital world when they struggle with basic needs?" The tension in the room shifted palpably. Belousov's resolve was evident. He was not merely a participant in this dialogue but a voice demanding change. How might their lives improve if they were seen, if they mattered? The room buzzed with renewed energy, discussions bubbling to life as Belousov sat back down. The applause that followed was not just out of courtesy, but a collective acknowledgement of truth, a release of pent-up frustration over hollow policies. As the session concluded, the weight of his words lingered. He knew that while the politicos might forget, the echoes of his call for genuine action would resonate beyond the chamber. The mundane sounds of chairs scraping against the floor filled the passage, akin to the tension unraveling. Belousov took his time leaving, his footsteps sounding resolute, each step a metronome marking the potential for change unleashed that day. In the corridor, he noticed a young aide, a nervous smile plastered across his face, fumbling with a tablet. "Minister, you were outstanding. The people will appreciate it." The young man stumbled over his words, excitement palpable. Without missing a beat, Belousov offered his measured response, "People will only appreciate change when they feel it, not when they hear promises." The aide faltered but nodded, the weight of reality grounding his enthusiasm. As Belousov walked to his next engagement, he reflected on the delicate balance between hope and reality, recognizing that meaningful impact takes more than flashy presentations. It requires listening, understanding, and above all, action. The journey ahead would not be easy, but armed with the truth, he was ready for the battles yet to come. In an unexpected twist of events, Defense Minister Andrei Belousov stormed into the conference hall, catching everyone off guard. The atmosphere was charged as he took center stage, ready to confront the prominent figures, German Graf and Valentina Matvienko. Their faces drained of color as they fidgeted, desperately seeking a way to justify their actions. This was no casual moment, it was the start of a revolution in political discourse. As the meeting progressed, Gref animatedly presented his vision of a digital ruble. His confident tone and engaging slides painted a bright future filled with convenience and innovation. Matvienko gamely chimed in, lending support as laughter echoed through the hall. Their audience, seduced by the spectacle, appeared blissfully unaware of the harsh realities in the villages, places where a stable internet connection was still a distant dream. Belousov, however, felt his irritation simmering just beneath the surface. Having spent months in the trenches of defense, he recognized a stark disconnect between aspiration and reality. The eyes of the soldiers and elderly he encountered had haunted him. These were not mere statistics but human lives, demanding respect in every political debate. With deliberate calm, he leaned forward and clasped his hands, reclaiming the room's attention. When he spoke, a palpable silence ensued, as if the air itself had thickened with tension. "Enough," he declared, his voice steady yet commanding. Valentina Ivanovna, German Oscarovich, his icy tone cut through the previous joviality like a knife. "You idolize China's technological advances. Yet do you realize they execute for corruption? That families face bills for the bullets that end a life?" Each word was a bullet, echoing in the hearts of the attendees. As the weight of his words sank in, he stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "Before you push for a digital ruble, let's first consider the basics. How can an elderly woman with a flip phone navigate this new currency without access to an ATM for 20 kilometers? His challenges hung in the air, demanding acknowledgement. Silence enveloped the hall, heavy and profound. Suddenly, the room erupted into genuine applause, an authentic acknowledgement of unexpected truth. People rose, clapping fervently as if they had finally been liberated from years of silence. Belousov, impassive and stoic, simply nodded, recognizing this as a small victory amidst the ongoing struggle ahead. The applause continued to swell and recede, like waves crashing against a shore, fueled by a collective desire for honesty in a space flooded with empty rhetoric. Gref's demeanor shifted, the normally composed banker appeared rattled, his once assertive expression faded into a sallow hue. Matvienko, trying to weather the storm, attempted to restore order with a practiced smile, yet it betrayed her rising anxiety. She realized something pivotal just transpired, a moment captured by every camera in the room. But was this the moment of change or just the beginning of a greater confrontation? In a breathtaking moment that shifted the atmosphere in the conference hall, a shocking confrontation unfolded between key political figures. With tension palpable, Minister Andrei Romovich Belousov faced off against German Gref and Valentina Matvienko, challenging the very foundations of their arguments. Belousov remained unyielding, like a stone statue, slightly bowing his head, accepting the applause not as a personal accolade, but as an affirmation of truth. There was no trace of vanity in his gaze. He mastered the art of silence, a quiet power that amplified his words. As the clapping diminished, he spoke again, this time with a calm yet compelling tone. "If you rush, you draw ridicule from the people. You propose a system this country is unprepared for. Let's not begin with fanfare, let's start with infrastructure. Let's bring the internet to areas that lack it. Ensure elderly people have access to basic services. Construct villages where digital currency can function practically, rather than as a jest. Then, perhaps in a few years, we'll be able to discuss a widespread transition. But right now, as you elaborate on impressive schemes, real people are living in the moment." He paused, casting a sharp gaze at several deputies. They averted their eyes. Guilt flickered across some faces, irritation on others, yet no one dared to refute him. The ambience in the hall shifted again, people were no longer applauding but whispering among themselves, some nodding in quiet acknowledgement of his truth. The air brimmed with a new energy, as if fresh winds had swept through the room. Belousov returned to his seat, reclining slightly, arms crossed, closing his eyes momentarily. In that brief moment, he felt transported back to his days as an economist, sitting in meetings that now felt trivial compared to the gravity of human existence. Memories flooded him, charts of inflation, endless reports, and he remembered the elderly woman from the abandoned village where aid had recently been delivered. She had clutched a worn 100-ruble note, declaring, "This is my wealth, dear." Her fingers trembled, yet her eyes sparkled with determination. Digital currency was beyond her comprehension, it was a luxury she didn't require. All she needed was the assurance that she could buy bread tomorrow. Belousov opened his eyes. His expression bore no anger, only a quiet resolve. He recognized that officials might dismiss his words as mere emotion, but he was certain someone in that room would remember his message. More importantly, he believed it was too loud a truth for the outside world to ignore, echoing through the corridors of power like a clarion call for change. The screen displayed graph slides of numbers and diagrams, now reduced to empty visuals devoid of meaning. In his mind, Belousov considered, an economy without humanity is not an economy, it's merely a game for the privileged. Sitting straight, he placed his hands on the table and murmured to himself, "Well, one battle is won." The session dragged on longer than usual, with officials exiting the hall like actors after a failed performance, some smiling too stiffly, while others masked their dissatisfaction behind folders and briefcases. In no hurry to leave, Belousov enjoyed a moment of contemplative silence. When most had departed, he stood, buttoned his jacket, and made his way to the exit. His footsteps echoed steadily across the stone floor, like a metronome marking the rhythm of the day. The corridor buzzed with activity as a young aide approached, his nervous smile strained as he spoke too rapidly. "Minister Andrei Romovich, you were brilliant today. You put everyone in their place. The people will appreciate this." Belousov paused, looked directly at him, and calmly replied, "People will appreciate it when they feel the change, not just hear it." The aide faltered, nodded awkwardly, and retreated hastily. Next came a familiar face from the economic bloc, a man with a shrewd squint and an unchanging expensive tie. "Andrei," he said, lightly touching Belousov's elbow, "as direct as always. But you know that won't sit well with everyone, especially Gref. He's got a long memory. Matvienko won't forget either." Belousov didn't flinch from the gesture, his tone steady as he interjected, "I only understand one thing, there are lives at stake here." In the previous part, the tension in the room became palpable as a pivotal moment unfolded. A character named Andrei Romovich Belousov had just delivered a powerful critique against the complacency and disconnect of his colleagues regarding the real struggles of the citizens in his country. With his piercing words, he left the audience stunned, reflecting on the human cost behind the numbers. When Belousov opened his eyes, a quiet resolve replaced any signs of anger or fatigue on his face. He knew his words would be forgotten by most officials, who would try to dismiss his passionate outburst as mere emotion. Yet, some in the chamber would remember, and more importantly, the people outside would hear him. This truth, too powerful to be hushed by bureaucratic protocols, resonated in the air. He glanced at the projection screen filled with Gref's data and graphs, now appearing as lifeless symbols devoid of meaning. An economy without humanity isn't an economy at all, it's merely a game for the elite, he thought. Sitting up straight, he aligned his hands on the table, whispering to himself, "Well, that was one round played." The atmosphere shifted back to its usual cadence, but the sense that something significant had transpired lingered. The very walls seemed to absorb his words. The meeting concluded later than usual, and officials exited the hall like actors finishing a poorly received performance. Some smiled too rigidly, while others masked their discontent behind folders and briefcases. Belousov moved at his own pace, ever skilled at pausing for effect in negotiations and life alike. As most departed, he stood, buttoned his jacket, and headed towards the exit. His footsteps echoed softly against the stone floor, each step metronomic in its timing, marking the rhythm of the day. The corridor bustled with activity as he reached the doors, where a few people waited. The first to approach was a young aide, nervously smiling, tablet in hand. "Andrei Romovich," he began rapidly, "you were spectacular today, really put everyone in their place. The public will appreciate it, trust me." Belousov paused, scrutinizing him before responding coolly, People will appreciate it only when they feel real change, not just hear promises. The young man faltered, nodded, and mumbled something before hurrying away. Next came an old acquaintance from the economic department. This man had a shrewd glance and always sported an expensive tie. "Andrei," he said, lightly touching Belazov's arm. "You are as sharp as ever. But remember, our circles don't take kindly to such candor. Gref has a long memory, and so does Matvienko." Belazov met his gaze without flinching. "I need to understand just one thing, it's about the country and its people." A startling confrontation unfolded in a pivotal meeting, challenging the very foundations of authority. Just moments ago, Defense Minister Andrei Romovich Belousov stormed into the assembly, silencing the crowd as he confronted prominent leaders like Hermann Gref and Valentina Matvienko. Their reactions were palpable, faces drained of color, eyes darting, scrambling for excuses. This wasn't a joke or mere rumor, it was a moment poised to alter the political landscape forever. Stay tuned, as the revelations may astonish you. Belousov's arrival was anything but ordinary. He didn't push the door wide, nor did he pause for effect. Instead, he entered with an air of resolve. Government members, accustomed to polite exchanges and rehearsed smiles, momentarily dropped their facades. He carried himself with a blend of certainty and grace, reminiscent of a soldier marching on parade, yet his steps were the soft tread of an economist who had maneuvered through corridors of power for decades. Once an economist, now the Minister of Defense, he cast a critical eye over the familiar surroundings, the old assembly room, heavy with the scent of paper and politics yet lacking the acrid odor of gunpowder. As he settled onto the periphery of the chamber, he observed the frenzy. Gref, ever the showman, energetically launched into a presentation about the digital ruble, his slides flickering like a tech advertisement rather than a serious economic strategy. The room buzzed with laughter and enthusiasm. Gref painted an idyllic picture of a future with direct digital pension payments, safe, convenient, devoid of paperwork. Matvienko seemed to support the theatricality, her eyes glowing with pride, particularly at the mention of China's advancements. But in that cheerful atmosphere, Belousov's inner turmoil boiled. Having spent months immersed in the realities of war and human suffering, he recognized that the economy was not mere digits. Soldiers, families, the elderly he had met in hospitals, they were the essence of his concern. How dare they trivialize their lives, discussing such weighty matters as if it were a game? He leaned forward, clasped his hands, and stood. The room fell silent, the air crackled. "Enough," he intoned, his voice low yet piercing. "Valentina Ivanovna, Hermann Oscarovich." He cut through their rhetoric with unblinking clarity. "You idolize China's efficiency, intangible conveniences, but tell me, do you understand the price they pay for corruption? You speak of bright futures while ignoring the plight of our villagers. What was a digital currency to a grandmother with no reliable internet?" As he spoke, he felt the tension stretch, thick as smoke. The room held its breath as applause erupted, a wave of authenticity wash over them. The clapping grew from hesitant to enthusiastic, each clap echoed a longing for genuine conversation amidst the hollow speeches they had endured for too long. Yet amidst the chaos, Belousov remained stoic, knowing this was just one battle in a far larger war. He observed the mixed emotions on the faces surrounding him, some angered, others nervous. Matvienko attempted to soften the situation, clapping along, but her eyes betrayed a deeper fear. They realized they were at a turning point. Settling back in his chair, the exhilaration of victory subsided. He closed his eyes, recalling the laughter, the applause. It was overwhelming, yet what resonated most was the bitter truth: they did not understand. They were engaged in a charade of reforms while the populace struggled to survive. A phone rang sharply on his desk, disrupting his thoughts. Recognizing the voice of a former colleague, now critical of the administration, Belousov stayed grounded. "You delivered a blow today," the voice teased. "In the halls, they're calling you a hero, or a provocateur. Whose side will the pendulum swing to now?" "I don't think about pendulums," he replied, calm as ever. "I think about people." A moment of silence followed before a faint chuckle emerged. That's why we respect you, Andre. Just be cautious. They have long fingers and short memories, sometimes the other way around. As he pondered these words, a gentle unease settled in. The phone call ended abruptly, leaving Belousov deep in thought. Caution was not unfamiliar to him. Yet, he understood that there are moments when caution crosses the line into betrayal. He stood up and approached the window. Outside, silhouettes of guards moved about, and cars came and went in a steady stream. The city continued its chaotic life, filled with traffic jams, bustling markets, and elderly women gathering near their doorsteps. For them, the digital currency was not a reform, it was merely a distant concept. What mattered was that the hallway lights worked, that medicine stocked the pharmacies, and that pensions were distributed on time. Let's start small, he murmured to himself, contemplating villages, internet access, and roads. He thought those in power could argue all they wanted. Turning back to his desk, he noticed the folders filled with reports from the Ministry of Defense. The first page began detailing supply reports. A sigh escaped him. War and economy had intertwined in his life, each representing different facets of the same coin, and he had to navigate between them. The clock struck 9 in the evening. Darkness blanketed the outside, broken only by spotty streetlights casting yellow circles of light across the yard. Just as he intended to delve deeper into the reports, there was a soft knock at the door. "Come in," he said. Without turning around, the door swung open with a near-silent grace. Standing at the threshold was German Graf, alone, stripped of his usual entourage. He appeared tall and poised, dressed in a meticulously tailored suit. With a weary yet self-assured smile. "Andrei Romovich," he began as he entered, "I didn't expect to see you here so late." Belousov slowly closed the folder, set his pen aside, and raised his gaze. "I thought you preferred to communicate through presentations." Graf's smile faltered slightly. He moved to the chair opposite and sat down, exuding an air of authority rather than that of a guest. "You made quite an impression today," he admitted, almost surprised. The audience stood and applauded. "That rarely happens." "Perhaps you've not heard the truth in a while," Belousov replied calmly. Graf squinted, his amusement fading. "Everyone has their version of the truth. Yours is about villages and grandmothers with button phones. Mine centers on the country's future. If we wait for the last village to connect to the internet, we'll be stuck in the Stone Age." As the tension rose, both men were acutely aware of the gulf between their perceptions. Could Belousov somehow shift that perception? Would caution serve him better than conflict in the relentless dance of power? But the unexpected loomed large. What if Belousov's truth could spark more than just applause? What if it could ignite a revolution? The energy of the room crackled, making them both realize the weight of the impending conversation. Little did Graf know, a storm was brewing within Belousov's mind, one that would challenge not just policies, but the very fabric of their society. Would he change the narrative right here, right now? In a stunning confrontation, the newly appointed defense minister Andrew Romovich Belousov shattered the complacency of the political elite. Just moments ago, he stepped into a government hall, instantly commanding attention without a single word uttered. The faces of powerful figures like German Graf and Valentina Matvienko paled as they struggled to muster a response. What transpired next could create ripples that transformed the very landscape of power and politics. As Belousov entered, it was more than a typical arrival. He glided through the door, not seeking approval or recognition, but rather existing in a space filled with the faint sense of paper, coffee, and authority, the stale atmosphere of political theater. He settled slightly off-center, dressed in a meticulously tailored dark suit, embodying a calm yet unmistakable intensity. His gaze pierced through the superficial pleasantries, aware of the tension brewing just beneath the surface. German Graf, animated as he initiated a presentation on the digital ruble, filled the air with grand proclamations of digital advancement. "We must transition to a new model," he insisted, waving his hands like a conductor orchestrating an economic symphony. Matvienko nodded in rhythm, amplifying the charade. But while they acted out this polished routine, Belousov's irritation simmered just beneath his stoic facade. Can't you see the disconnect? A war is fought not with numbers but with lives, families, soldiers, and the elderly depending on every chance they can grab for a handful of sustenance. The room, once echoing with laughter over distant technology, was now heavy with unspoken truths. And so, he leaned forward, hands clasped, rising, the energy in the room shifted like a tide. Enough, he declared softly yet powerfully, his words slicing through the pretense. Suddenly, the air chilled as everyone felt the gravity of his presence. Valentina Ivanovna, German Oscarovich, he addressed them, his voice unwavering. You laud China's digital success. But have you considered their method of enforcing compliance? Would you desire that approach here? The tension escalated like a coiled spring ready to snap. As he delved deeper into the stark realities faced by regular people, those without reliable internet or the elderly grappling with technology, every sentence resonated like a waking clarity. The uncertainty in Gref's eyes betrayed him, and in that moment, the facade of authority began to crack. Belousov maintained his gaze, ready for the inevitable rebuttal. Before pushing towards a digital future, perhaps we should address the present. Gref leaned back, visibly agitated. Words can be dangerous, Andrew, he cautioned. The irony hung heavy in the air. They stared at each other, both aware that this confrontation was but a round in an ongoing battle for the soul of their nation. Silence swallowed the room as Belousov maintained his steady demeanor, a soldier armed not with weapons but with the conviction of truth. Would his voice resonate beyond this hall? Would change ripple through layers of the bureaucracy, a chiaroscuro against the backdrop of their sterile discussions? There's strength in the people's memory, he finally said. As Gref turned to leave, closing the door on the discussion but not the tension. Alone at the window, Belousov watched the gray shadows of the town beyond and the sleek vehicle slipping away into the murmur of the city streets. Let them try, he whispered to himself. Power belongs to those who truly listen. The battle lines had been drawn, not merely over technology, but a fundamental question of governance: who speaks for the people? The clock was ticking, and the next move could change everything. Andrei Romovich Belousov, the newly appointed Minister of Defense, made an unexpected entrance into a gathering that would change the political landscape. He strode into the room unlike anyone else, not with a flourish or announcement, but with a quiet intensity that demanded attention. Members of the government, trapped in their habitual routines, paused, momentarily distracted from their digital devices and forced smiles. His calm demeanor, evident even in the way he walked, as if on parade yet almost silently, spoke volumes. Today, he allowed himself to revisit the past, stepping into the grand old meeting hall that once echoed with discussions and decisions, its air thick with the smell of paper and coffee, a stark contrast to the coldness of warfare. Seated away from the spotlight, dressed in a tailored dark gray suit, he listened intently. Across the hall, Hermann Gref enthusiastically presented a flashy proposal about a digital ruble, his words flowing confidently. The room buzzed with light-hearted banter as Valentina Matvienko occasionally chimed in, echoing the playful theatrics of the presentation. But outside this insulated atmosphere lay a different reality, one filled with struggle and distress. Fueling Belousov's growing irritation was the stark divide between their discussion of lofty technologies and the lives of ordinary people. He recognized what others seemed to overlook: the true value of human experience in times when numbers and digits were fondly idolized. Memories of soldiers, families affected by a war, and elderly citizens waiting for vital assistance consumed his thoughts. With a steady motion, he leaned forward, fingers interlaced, and rose to his feet. Silence ensued, interrupted only by the sound of an air conditioning unit, as his piercing gaze locked onto the speakers. Enough, he said, low yet powerful, causing a ripple of tension in the room. He began to challenge Gref and Matvienko directly, querying, "Do you admire China so much? There, for corruption, they impose death penalties. Do you want that?" Each word was a shot, striking deep and injecting a sobering awareness. The room was frozen, Gref visibly shifted, while Matvienko offered a strained smile, struggling for composure. Belousov stepped closer, his voice steady yet filled with gravity. He painted a stark picture of reality, pointing out villages still lacking basic internet services, questioning how a grandmother could use a digital currency on a non-functioning flip phone. As he spoke, the tension broke, applause erupted from those who had been yearning for honesty. For a moment, the stagnant air filled with a sense of hope, as if the atmosphere itself could breathe again. Disengaged from their pretenses, the audience began to stir, engaged with the truth of their existence, their longing echoing in the room. However, not everyone welcomed this shift. Gref's expression darkened, his control over the narrative slipping away, while Matvienko attempted to soothe the situation, clapping the loudest, though her concern was unmistakable. And in the eye of the storm, Belousov stood resolute, his demeanor calm amidst the chaos. As applause reverberated, he remained expressionless, absorbing the weight of the acknowledgement not as personal praise but as a collective yearning for authenticity. He knew the wheels of bureaucracy would attempt to suppress his words, dismissing them as mere emotional outbursts. But there would be those who remembered. Outside those walls, the voices of the people would resonate louder than any official jargon. His gaze shifted to the presentation slides, lifeless figures and graphs devoid of compassion. He quietly mused to himself, an economy built without humanity isn't an economy at all, but mere spectacle for the elite. Rising from the profound exchange, Belousov understood the significance of his words resonated deeply. The meeting ended, yet a lingering feeling of upheaval remained as officials departed, their facade of control cracked. While shadows loomed over the aftermath, Belousov took his time, his footsteps echoing like a metronome marking the tempo of a day transformed. As he navigated the bustling corridor, murmurs of unease rippled through the crowd. He noticed a young aide brimming with nervous energy, eager to praise him for his performance. Belousov paused, meeting the youth's gaze. "The people will appreciate changes when they truly feel them," he replied, his voice steady and unyielding. With each passing interaction, memories surfaced, of a fragile elderly woman clutching her last savings while grappling with the fear of an uncertain future. As he departed, he knew this would not be his last battle. The faces of those who needed real change lingered in his mind, pushing him forward toward the rigorous path ahead. In a dramatic turn of events, the defense minister, Andrei Romovich Belousov, stormed into the meeting hall, catching the seasoned politicians, Hermann Gref and Valentina Matvienko, completely off guard. Their faces drained of color, eyes darting around for justification as they faced him. This was not a rumor, this was a pivotal moment that had the potential to reshape the political landscape. Stay tuned, and prepare for a shocking revelation. With a presence that commanded attention, Andrei Belousov didn't enter the hall like an ordinary person. No theatrics, no lingering pauses, he simply walked in. The usual routines of polite greetings and distracted gazes faded as everyone's focus shifted to him. His stride was unwavering, blending the confidence of a military leader with the quiet assurance of a seasoned economist who navigated the corridors of power for years. Now, as the Minister of Defense, he was used to cold reports from the front line and troop numbers, but he allowed himself a moment of nostalgia. Taking a seat slightly off-center, he settled into the familiar but forgotten chair in the old meeting room, which still held the faint scents of paper and coffee. It reeked of power, not gunpowder. Dressed in a sharp dark gray suit, a symbol of precision, his features were chiseled, reflecting a man who had seen too much yet remained composed. As Gref launched into a spirited presentation about the digital ruble, the atmosphere turned playful. His confident voice echoed the usual rhetoric about innovation and convenience, supported by Matvienko's approval. But an unspoken tension hung in the air as Gref touted China's success with digital currency. "Why don't we embrace this vision?" he exclaimed, triggering laughter and nods from the crowd, blissfully unaware of the real struggles outside those walls. Belousov, however, felt a stirring anger beneath his calm exterior. He understood economics like no one else, but after months in defense, he realized a critical truth: war is about people, not numbers. He thought of the elderly he had seen in hospitals, staring blankly, clinging to memories of a world they barely recognized. Suddenly rising, he clasped his hands and called for silence. His words pierced the air like a laser, stark and unyielding. Enough. Valentina Ivanovna, Hermann Oskarovich, you speak highly of China, yet do you know the price of corruption there? Do you not see the lives at stake? His cool demeanor contrasted sharply with the rising tension in the room as he stared at them, each word striking harder than the last. Before we discuss digital currency, he continued, let's consider basic needs. There are villages without internet. How do you expect an elderly woman to manage digital payments on a flip phone? The stunned silence in the room was tangible, like a heavy fog, as he allowed his gaze to rest on his audience. A thunderous round of applause erupted, genuine and fervent. Faces lit up as if a long-forgotten truth had resurfaced, cutting through the routine banter like a breath of fresh air. The government officials, now shaken, looked visibly annoyed. Graf clenched his jaw. And Matvienko attempted to smooth things over with forced applause, but her unease was palpable. Belousov, unfazed, absorbed the ovation with a slight nod. He understood the fight was far from over. The applause faded, he opened with softer, yet more compelling words, pushing ahead without infrastructure will only lead to ridicule. Let's ensure access to basic services first. Then, we can envision a future where this digital currency can work. The energy in the room shifted as waves of realization swept through. As the crowd buzzed with discussion, he took note of their reluctant agreement. Several elder faces sparked with a glimmer of hope, albeit faint, as he made his way back to his vehicle. Clouds of dust rising in his wake, he reflected on the people he must represent, the ones who need change, not political jargon. As he stepped back into the chaos, a frail woman approached him, clutching a bag of bread and milk. You from Moscow? She asked, her voice tinged with caution. Yes, Belousov replied, a determined look in his eyes. I came to see how you are. Her smirk held no joy, mirroring a harsh reality that words alone cannot remedy. What can we expect? She continued. My pension is 9,000, half goes to medicine. The post office is 30 kilometers away, and even our TV struggles to catch a signal. You're talking about digital currency while we lack simple roads to the doctor. Listening intently, he felt her exhaustion resonate deeply within him, drowning out any anger left in his heart. At that moment, he resolved to fight not for statistics but for humanity. These were the people he ultimately served. The thrumming tension in the meeting hall, a stark contrast to the simplicity of the woman's worries, rested heavily in his mind as he prepared for the battles ahead. Each complaint recorded in his notepad symbolized a promise: roads, reliable communication, access to medical services. Not empty dreams, but actionable truths. In the previous segment, tension developed in a meeting where economic reforms were discussed, with the defense minister, Andrei Romovich Belazov, feeling frustrated by the detached conversation about digital currency. The urgency of the struggles faced by everyday people hung in the air. After his impactful speech, he contemplated the real lives behind the statistics, recognizing the powerful voices of those who stood resilient amid challenges. It wasn't for applause. It wasn't about political posturing. It was for those who fight to endure each day. Belazov shut his eyes for a brief moment of respite. Ahead lay new encounters, new battles. As he walked into the village council, the scent of dampness and aged paper hit him. The walls were coated in faded green paint, with metal cabinets stripped of their enamel lining. A long table heaped with papers, an old fax machine, and a battered laptop conveyed a sense of neglect. As Belazov entered, those waiting for him stood up. The village head, a weary man in his 50s with a heavy belly, extended his hand. Andrei Romovich, welcome. Honestly, we didn't expect you here. That's a mistake, Belazov replied calmly, shaking the man's hand. If we're talking about the country's digital future, it starts here. The village head fumbled a nervous smile while several staff members hovered behind him, a secretary loaded with papers, a bespectacled woman reminiscent of a librarian, and a young man who seemed to juggle IT with electrical work. We understand the importance of reforms, the head began, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief. But things are complicated here. Roads are a mess, internet access is limited to rooftops, and our budget. He hesitated, we really have no funds. What are you doing about it? Belazov pressed, locking eyes with him. The bureaucrat stuttered, well, we try, we solve things as best we can. So essentially, nothing, the minister concluded sharply. The silence that followed felt heavy, almost suffocating. Just then, the door creaked open and in walked a thin schoolteacher, weary but with a spark of passion in his eyes, his battered satchel stuffed with notebooks. Excuse me, he said breathlessly, I heard you were here. May I say a word? Belazov nodded, sensing the teacher's urgency. We have 30 kids in our school, he started, but the internet barely works, we only have 3 computers, 2 are outdated. I bring my laptop from home to even teach. Children hear on TV that the country is going digital, and they ask, where's this digital world? I don't know how to answer them. He spoke plainly but each word resonated with urgency and determination. What would happen when Belazov faced the challenge of tackling the disconnect between political promises and the reality faced in schools like these? Just moments ago, an extraordinary event unfolded. Defense Minister Andrei Romovich Belousov stormed into a meeting room and confronted 2 of the most powerful figures, Herman Gref and Valentina Matvienko. Their faces drained of color, eyes darting nervously for excuses that wouldn't come. This wasn't a rumor or some political game, it was a moment that could change everything. Stay with me, because what happened next will shock you. Belousov didn't enter like a typical politician. No grand entrance, no dramatic pause. He simply walked in, and that was enough. The room full of government officials, accustomed to polite rituals and half-hearted smiles, suddenly froze. They looked up from their tablets, caught unaware. His stride was like a confident march, yet soft, almost silent, an economist who had navigated the labyrinth of power for decades, now standing as defense minister, a man shaped by the cold realities of war, frontline reports, and stark numbers of loss and supply. Today, though, he allowed himself a small indulgence. He revisited the old hall where he had spent so many days. The smell of paper, strong coffee, and power hung in the air. There was no scent of gunpowder here, only authority. Taking a seat slightly off-center, he dressed in a precise dark gray suit, every crease sharp as the thoughts he would soon unleash. His face was carved from stone, high forehead, eyes narrowed with silent observation, lips curled in a faint, knowing smirk. He listened as Herman Gref energetically launched into a presentation about the digital ruble, flashing slides like a slick advertisement for a new gadget. Not an economic strategy. Gref's voice was steady, practiced. We must transition to a new model, he said, gesturing wildly. Pensioners will receive payments directly in digital rubles, it's safe, convenient, transparent. No more paper. Matvienko nodded along, clapped almost theatrically, backing him like an eager actor in a play. When Gref praised China's digital progress, her eyes shone brightly. Look at China, rapid digitization, happy pensioners, a growing country. Our grandmothers will adapt, they always do. Laughter rippled through the room. Some whispered about reactionaries, others jotted notes eagerly. The mood was light, almost playful, oblivious to the harsh reality outside these walls, villages where only hilltops caught a feeble signal, old people counting pennies and clutching their savings books like shields against chaos. Belousov watched quietly, irritation simmering beneath. He knew the economy better than most. But after months at the defense ministry, he learned something deeper. War wasn't numbers on a chart, it was people, soldiers, officers, families. The old men and women he'd seen in military hospitals, the grandmothers greeting trains with humanitarian aid. Their eyes were tired, yet alive. To watch them reduced to subjects in a flashy presentation was an insult he couldn't stomach. He leaned forward, clasped his hands firmly, and stood. The room hushed instantly. Those who had been laughing turned to him. His gaze cut through the air like a spotlight. Enough, he said quietly but clearly. Silence descended, thicker than before. broken only by the faint hum of the air conditioner. Valentina Ivanovna, Herman Oskarovich, he continued with icy calm, you speak endlessly about China, digitization, convenience, new technologies. It sounds impressive. But do you know that there, corruption is punished by death? That the family of a condemned person receives a bill for 8 yuan for 2 bullets? Is that what you want here? His voice never rose, yet each word landed like a bullet. The room froze. Matvienko's forced smile betrayed her discomfort. Gref's gaze drifted away, his hands trembling briefly. Moving closer, Belousov pressed on. Before we roll out the digital ruble, why don't we start with basics? Many villages don't have reliable internet. How is a grandmother supposed to manage digital currency with a simple flip phone? How will she collect her pension when the nearest ATM is 20 kilometers away? You're talking about the future, he said, eyes scanning the stunned faces, but ignoring the present. He paused. The weight of his words hung heavy. Then, unexpectedly, the room erupted, not with polite applause, but with heartfelt, loud clapping. People stood, exchanged surprised glances, as if hearing truth spoken aloud for the first time in ages. Belousov remained solemn, merely nodding to himself. Another battle won, his expression said silently, but the war is far from over. The applause surged and fell like waves, some tried to drown out years of empty speeches, others simply embraced a return to honesty. Gref stood rigid, jaw clenched, his usual confidence dimmed to a shade of gray. He hated being cornered. Especially publicly. Matvienko forced her applause louder, but her eyes betrayed her anxiety. She knew this moment was pivotal, and recorded by every camera in the room. Belousov held still, a steely statue with only a slight incline of the head. His was not vanity, but purpose. He mastered silence, letting the moment amplify his words. When the clapping finally eased, his voice softened, yet grew no weaker. You rush, you miss the mark. You propose a system the country isn't ready for yet. Let's start not with fanfare, but with infrastructure. Bring the internet to places where it doesn't exist. Provide accessible services for our elderly. Build villages where digital currency can work, not mock them. His eyes met several deputies across the room. They looked away. Some wore guilt, others irritation, none dared object. The room buzzed, now with subdued conversation. Heads nodded slowly, acknowledging the truth laid bare. Belousov leaned back in his chair, folded his arms, and briefly closed his eyes. Memories of economic graphs and endless reports flickered, things once deemed most important. Now, he knew better. Human life was fragile as glass, yet resilient. He recalled the old woman in a forgotten village, clutching a worn 100-ruble note. This is my wealth, son, she had told him, fingers trembling, eyes steady. She didn't grasp digital rubles or financial models. She needed certainty, food tomorrow, bread. His eyes opened. No anger, no fatigue, only quiet resolve. Officials would forget his words or label them emotional. But someone here would remember. More importantly, outside these walls, people would hear. Such truth is too loud to drown in reports. Glancing at Gref's flickering slides, numbers without life, he thought, economy without people is a game for the few. Sitting straight again, hands clasped, he whispered to himself, one round done. The meeting ended late. Officials left the room like actors after a failed show. Forced smiles, rehearsed indifference, and carefully hidden irritation filled their faces. Belousov lingered. He knew how to hold a pause, both in conversation and in life. When most had gone, he buttoned his jacket and headed out. His footsteps echoed steadily on the stone floor, like a metronome marking the day's real rhythm. The corridor bustled. At the door, a young assistant nervously approached, tablet in hand. Andrei Romovich, you nailed it today, he rushed out. You put them in their place. People will appreciate this, trust me. Belousov paused, met his gaze calmly, and said, people will appreciate it when they feel real change, not just words. The youth frowned, nodded awkwardly, and hurried away. Soon, an old acquaintance from the economic block appeared, shrewd eyes behind expensive ties. "Andrei," he muttered, tapping Belousov's elbow. "You're always blunt. But you know they don't like that. Graf remembers. Matvienko won't forget." He smiled thinly. "You get how this works." Belousov did not recoil, but he didn't smile either. His voice was steady. "I understand only one thing." What is the one thing Belousov understands? Will his bold truth spark real change or fall to the usual political inertia? The answer lingers as the echoes of this confrontation fade into a restless silence. A few moments ago, something unbelievable unfolded. The defense minister, Andrei Romovich Belousov, boldly stormed into the chamber and decisively put Hermann Graf and Valentina Matvienko in their place. Their faces paled, nerves betrayed them as they scrambled for excuses. This wasn't a rumor or a joke. It was reality, one that could shift the entire course of politics. Stay with me, because the revelations will shock you to your core. Andrei Belousov entered not like any ordinary person. He didn't fling open the door or pause for dramatic effect. He simply stepped inside, and that alone commanded attention. Government officials, accustomed to formal rituals and tired smiles, froze mid-scroll on their tablets. There was something in his stride, like a confident march on a parade ground, yet soft and nearly silent, as if shaped by decades sliding through corridors of power. Now, as defense minister, he was a man familiar with underground command centers, frontline reports, stark casualty numbers, and logistical realities. But today, he allowed himself a rare indulgence, to revisit an old meeting hall where he once spent the majority of his days. The scent of paper, coffee, and politics lingered here, not the smell of gunpowder, but the fragrance of authority. Belousov didn't take the center seat or the front row. Instead, he chose a spot on the side, a place where he could observe unnoticed at first. His dark gray suit was immaculate, pressed with the meticulousness he applied to his thoughts. His face was sharply carved, like stone, high forehead, narrowed eyes that held secrets. And a faint smirk of irony beneath. He listened. Around him, the hall buzzed. Hermann Graf, vibrant as ever, launched into a slick presentation on the digital ruble. Slides flickered fast, resembling more an ad for a new gadget than an economic strategy. His voice boomed with the confidence of a man running a bank with millions of clients. "We must adopt a new model," he declared, waving his hands. "Pensions should be paid directly in digital rubles. It's safe, convenient, transparent, no need for paper money." Valentina Matvienko sat nearby, nodding along, applauding occasionally like she was part of an elaborate stage play. When Graf mentioned China, her eyes ignited. "Look at China, digital modernization is in full swing there. Pensions work smoothly, the country grows. Our elderly? They'll adjust and be happy too." Laughter rippled through the room. Some whispered about backwardness, others jotted notes approvingly. The atmosphere felt light, almost playful. No one seemed to remember the harsh reality outside these walls, villages where the signal barely reaches a hilltop, frail seniors counting every kopeck, clutching worn passbooks as if they were their last defense against chaos. Belousov watched quietly, irritation brewing inside. He understood economics like no one else. But after months leading the defense ministry, he grasped something more. War was not numbers. It was about people, soldiers, officers, families. The elders he'd seen in military hospitals, grandmothers waiting at train stations to receive humanitarian aid. Their eyes were tired but alive. And it felt insulting that anyone would reduce their fate to a fashionable PowerPoint presentation. He leaned forward, clasped his hands firmly, and stood up. His movement was calm, but the room hushed instantly. Those who had been giggling moments before turned. Belousov lifted his head, his gaze cut through the air like a spotlight. "Enough," he said quietly, but every word rang out crystal clear. Suddenly, the room was silent. Even the hum of the air conditioner seemed louder. Valentina Ivanovna, Herman Oskarovich, he began with cold composure. You praise China, digitalization, convenience, new technology. Sounds great. But if you admire China so much, are you aware that corruption there is punished by death? Families of those executed receive bills, 8 yuan for 2 bullets. Is that your vision for us? His voice never rose, yet each phrase struck like a shot. The chamber froze. Matvienko's lips stretched into a strained smile, as if uncertain how to react. Gref averted his gaze, his hands trembled briefly. Belousov stepped closer. Before we implement a digital ruble, he continued, perhaps we should start with the basics. Villages still lack proper internet. How do you expect a grandmother with a simple button phone to pay with digital currency? How will she get her pension if the nearest ATM is 20 kilometers away? You talk about the future, he paused, eyes burning into the faces of several deputies, but you ignore the present. Silence dropped like a heavy bell. Then, applause erupted, raw, genuine, and loud. People stood, clapped fervently. Some exchanged glances as if hearing the truth for the first time in years. Belousov didn't smile, he merely nodded inwardly. One battle won. But many more lay ahead. The applause swelled and ebbed like waves, trying to drown out years of hollow speeches. It carried not just agreement but a thirst, for words rarely spoken in halls submerged in protocols and charts. Gref stood firm but clenched his jaw, his usual confident, slightly smug face drained of color. He disliked being cornered, especially in public. Matvienko tried to soften the moment, clapping slightly louder than the rest, but her eyes betrayed anxiety. She knew this was a turning point, and every camera caught it. Belousov remained still, like a stone statue, his head bowed slightly, not accepting praise, but recognizing common sense. No vanity in his gaze. He wielded silence like a weapon, bolstering his message amidst noise. When the clapping died down, he spoke again, softer but no less powerful, rush, and you'll only bring mockery. You propose a system the country isn't ready for. Let's start not with fanfares but infrastructure. Let's bring internet where none exists. Provide simple services for the elderly. Build villages where digital money can actually work, not humiliate. He scanned the room. Deputies avoided eye contact, some wore guilt, others irritation. None dared argue. The chamber came alive again, but subdued. Whispered conversations, nods of reluctant assent. The air felt fresh, as though a new current swept through. Belousov sat back, folded his arms, and closed his eyes briefly. Memory surfaced, inflation graphs. Endless reports. Once economics seemed everything. Now, he knew the priceless value of life, fragile like glass, yet stubbornly resilient. He recalled a grandmother in a forgotten village, recently receiving aid. She clung to a tattered 100-ruble note, trembling fingers clutching, eyes firm. This is my wealth, son, she had said. She didn't understand digital ruble. She didn't need to. What she longed for was certainty, certainty that tomorrow she could buy bread. Belousov opened his eyes. No anger, no fatigue, just quiet resolve. He knew officials would forget his words, dismiss them as emotion. Yet, someone in that chamber would remember. And, most importantly, the people outside would hear. This kind of truth was too loud to be muffled by protocols. He glanced back at Gref's slide cycling on the screen. Numbers and charts now looked like hollow images, lifeless. He thought, economics without people isn't economics. It's a game for an elite few. Sitting upright again, he quietly told himself, one game played. The room slowly returned to its routine rhythm, but the feeling lingered. Something important had occurred here. Even the walls seemed to have absorbed his words. The meeting ended late. Officials filed out like actors after a failed performance. Some smiled too tightly, others masked indifference. Others hid displeasure behind folders and briefcases. Belousov didn't rush away. He had mastered the art of timing, in negotiations, and in life. Once the crowd thinned, he rose, buttoned his jacket, and walked toward the exit. His footsteps echoed evenly on the stone floor, like a metronome marking the day's rhythm. The corridor bustled. Near the door, a few awaited. First, a young aide with a nervous smile and a tablet. Andrei Romovich, he spoke too fast. Your speech today was brilliant. You put them all in their place. People will appreciate this, believe me. Belousov paused, met the young man's gaze calmly. People will appreciate when they feel real change, not just hear words. The aide blushed, nodded, muttered something unintelligible, and hurried away. Next came an old acquaintance from the economic bloc. A man with a sly squint and always a pricey tie. Andrei, he said, nudging Belousov's elbow lightly. You're sharp as ever, but you know, in our circles, bluntness like that isn't welcome. Gref holds grudges. Matvienko won't forget either. You realize how this game's played. Belousov didn't pull away, but didn't return the gesture either. His voice was calm. I understand only one thing, there is. The day before an urgent meeting, he received a call. You're expected to be there tomorrow, came the voice on the line. He nodded quietly, absorbing the weight of the message. Tomorrow would not just be about defending his words but the very essence of meaningful reform. He knew his opponents would be shrewd, prepared, and ruthless. How can you push for a digital currency when basic needs aren't met? Those daring words echoed in his mind like a heavy burden. He leaned back in his chair, fingers interlaced, eyes fixed on the ceiling, replaying vivid images in his mind. The old man with a buttoned phone, the teacher hunched over a laptop, the woman clutching a loaf of bread. These snapshots resonated deeper than any argument he could muster. Let the battle begin, he spoke aloud to himself, determination igniting within him. The sun barely crested the horizon as he arrived at the Kremlin, met by the familiar silence of the corridors. Thick carpet muffled every footfall, walls ready to absorb the tension in the air. Inside the meeting room, key players awaited, ministers, banking heads, and council representatives sat in taut anticipation. Some wore masks of indifference while others barely concealed their curiosity. Without flourish, he took his seat and opened his notebook, ready to face the looming storm. The first voice to break the stillness was the deputy prime minister's, tone sharp yet level. We have a situation. The Minister of Defense engages in public discourse on economic policies. A collective gaze fell on him, but he held his silence, feeling the pressure build. Seizing the moment. Hermann Gref sidled in with feigned congeniality. I respect you, Andrew, but let's be honest. A trip to the village is not an economic strategy. The digital ruble is essential, a leap into the future. The room stirred with murmurs of approval, nods of agreement from some, smiles from others. With resolve, he lifted his gaze and addressed the group. Hermann, do you truly label as populism the plight of millions without internet, without ATMs, without access to physicians? That's not populism, it's harsh reality. Populism is promising a future while ignoring the present. Silence enveloped the room. I've seen it firsthand, he continued. 3 computers in a school, 2 of them broken. Pensioners waiting for funds once a month, if luck is on their side. Would the room acknowledge his truth? Would they dare to confront the reality he laid bare? The air grew thick, awaiting the reverberation of change, caught between discomfort and awakening. The tension in the room was palpable. The stark reality of life without modern conveniences hung heavily over the proceedings. A voice suddenly broke the silence. You want them to switch to digital currency by tomorrow? That's not reform, it's mockery. The weight of those words stunned the assembly, silencing even those ready to argue. At the front, Valentina Matvienko adjusted her glasses, her voice shaky as she asked, but what are you suggesting? We can't wait decades for every village to get connected. Leaning forward, Andrei Romovich Belousov replied, let's start with what makes sense, infrastructure. Internet access in every village, reliable communication, proper roads. Only then can the digital ruble become a viable tool, rather than just a fantasy. Gref smirked subtly, his irritation barely masked. The room was spellbound by Belousov, hanging on his every word. Then came a challenge from the crowd, but what if there's no money? Belousov shot back crisply, there is money. It's just being wasted on flashy projects that serve no purpose for the people. Cut the vanity projects, and there's more than enough to fund the internet rollout and open pharmacies where they are needed. With those remarks, he tossed down a gauntlet of truth that echoed deep in the hall. Murmurs rippled through the audience, some coughed nervously, while others looked away, contemplating the implications of his stance. The meeting carried on for another hour, but it was evident, the battle was far from over. Belousov had spoken just as he intended. Never flinching from the truths that felt too simple and too honest for an environment accustomed to convoluted phrases. As he exited the Kremlin, the fresh air seemed invigorating. He knew there would be backlash, possibly even attacks, but he felt a profound strength that many lacked, the assurance that the truth stood firmly with him. The public's reaction was swift and fierce. Within a day, social media exploded with clips of Belousov's speech, his visit to Lipovtsy shared across various groups, our district, the village lives on. One video showcased an elder proudly displaying his button phone, proclaiming, "This is my digit." Laughter blended with a bittersweet flavor as the truth resonated, evident in the comments flooding in, "Here's a real minister, speaking plainly, unafraid to tell it like it is." Meanwhile, Telegram channels buzzed, caught in the crossfire of public opinion. Would Belousov's bold stance ignite real change, or would it merely fizzle out in the political limbo? Only time would tell. In recent news, the name Belousov has been gaining traction. For some, he is a hero. For others, a troublesome truth-teller. One thing is clear, he has become a symbol of the much-awaited conversation. Belousov reads reports with a calm demeanor. No celebration or euphoria, only weary acceptance and a solid understanding that there is no turning back now. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. With a soft click, he closed his tablet. As rumors swirled through the regions, anxiety gripped the offices in Moscow. The more Belousov was discussed outside, the tenser his rivals became within the capital. During a Federation Council meeting, the first overt criticisms emerged. A senator, rising to her feet, declared, "The Minister of Defense should focus on national security, not criticize economic reforms. We cannot allow such a breach of discipline." The applause that followed was weak and hesitant, but the message was loud and clear, a campaign against him had begun. That same day, multiple newspapers ran synchronized headlines, "The dangerous ambitions of Belousov, Minister of Defense or candidate for the stage?" The articles cautiously hinted that Belousov sought popularity, undermined his colleagues' trust, and played to the crowd. Conversations in government corridors became hushed but pointed. One minister whispered to another, "He won't last long, his voice too loud." Yet, not all voices were hostile. Several Duma members, who had previously remained silent, unexpectedly spoke out in support of him. One even wrote in his blog, "I don't always agree with the Minister of Defense, but he's right. A digital ruble without roads or connectivity is farce. We must listen to the people, not just presentations." This sparked a wave of comments, aligning political backing for Belousov. In the evening, an old friend, a seasoned politician, strolled into Belousov's office. He sank into a chair across from him, pulled out a cigar but left it unlit, merely rolling it between his fingers. "Andrei," he said, his voice gravelly. "Do you realize what you did? You spoke the truth." Belousov replied calmly, "Yes, but truth is more dangerous than lies here. Now they will bend you publicly and quietly. Some will demand your resignation, while others will smile to your face and plot behind your back." The veteran leaned in, studying him. "Are you ready for this?" "Ready," Belousov answered succinctly. The old politician chuckled softly. "Well then, know this, you already have allies." In the tense atmosphere of the council chamber, a palpable sense of foreboding hung like smoke in the air. The rhythmic ticking of the clock marked each moment as senators exchanged furtive glances. What would unfold today? As Belousov prepared to confront his critics, he could almost hear the echo of past battles, the scent of burnt tobacco and coffee lingering in his mind, reminding him of countless debates where truth was often a casualty. As he stepped into the chamber, he was met with a murmur that slowly faded into a hush. The air crackled with anticipation. He could feel the weight of their gazes, like arrows aimed to pierce his resolve. What would he say? What truths lay buried, waiting to be unearthed? He wouldn't shy away. The stakes were too high. Enough, he said, his voice cutting through the oppressive silence. Was it too late for honesty in politics? The once lively chamber descended into stillness. Belousov locked eyes with Valentina Matvienko and German Graf. You boast of innovations in China, yet do you realize that their penalties for corruption are lethal? He felt the tension rise, a tremor of uncertainty rippling through the crowd. The weight of his words hung heavy, igniting a spark of courage among the silent supporters in the room. Suddenly, the applause erupted, genuine, thunderous, as the facade of complacency shattered. In that moment, he was no longer just a minister, he was the voice of the unheard. As the applause died down, he continued softly yet firmly, let's not rush to the future while the present drowns in neglect. The people deserve more than a shiny presentation, they need tangible change. The room shifted, a collective realization dawning on them. Belousov had not only challenged their complacency but had ignited a fire for authenticity and connection. With each heartbeat, the dynamic in the chamber transformed. His mere presence demanded respect. The underlying question now lingered in the air, how far would those in power go to silence him? In that charged silence, a sense of unity began to emerge among his supporters. As Belousov took his seat once more, he felt an unexpected wave of relief wash over him. In the chaotic whirl of politicians' maneuvers, he had planted a seed of change. What awaited him outside these walls? Only time would tell. But his heart was set on turning the tides of insincerity towards transparency. The game had only just begun. In the quiet of a dimly lit office, two men prepared for the storm that was about to take place. Andrei Romovich Belousov knew the stakes were high. Truth is more dangerous than lies here, he said, his voice calm yet firm. They'll twist your words publicly and quietly. Some will demand your resignation, while others will smile at you and plot behind your back. He looked intensely at his companion. Are you ready for that? I'm ready, Belousov replied tersely. The other man smirked in acknowledgement. Well then, know this, you already have allies. Belousov took a moment to consider the weight of his words. Not everyone would support him, but enough would ensure that the clamor wouldn't die down. The people were behind him, and the people were power. Even in Moscow, they feared its might. The room fell silent save for the ticking clock, as minutes slipped by unnoticed. After a moment, Belousov rose and approached the window. Below, the city glittered with a myriad of lights, alive and bustling. Tomorrow he would be discussed again, facing yet another barrage of criticism. But deep down, he felt a flicker of hope. His words had ignited a spark in the villages like Lipovtsy, and that fueled him. The invitation had come out of the blue, an excited but courteous voice from one of the major federal channels had reached him late that evening. Andrei Romovich, we have a live broadcast tomorrow. The topic, the digital ruble and the future of our economy. We'd like you to participate. You'll face representatives from the central bank and German Oscarovich. Hesitation lingered in the air. It was a trap. Blatant and crude, yet to refuse would only spark rumors of fear and retreat. I'll participate, he decided after a brief pause. The line went silent. He settled back into his chair, grabbed a pen, and opened his notebook. It was filled with notes on roads, internet access, pharmacies, and schools, all the voices he had heard in Lipovtsy. He realized his opponents would wield numbers and graphs, while he had the true stories of real people, and that gave him strength. The next morning, the studio buzzed with artificial brightness and editing chaos. Assistants scrambled with tablets, makeup artists adjusted the host's appearances for the camera. It felt more like a spectacle than a discussion about the nation's future. Andrei Romovich, the host approached, her rehearsed smile and cold eyes making no effort to mask her underlying tension. "Thank you for being here. We're expecting a tough conversation. Hope you're prepared." "Always," he replied, his demeanor stoic. In the green room, he faced himself in the mirror. His weary face held a steadfastness. The graze at his temples lent him an air of authority, while his calm gaze reflected his resolve. He understood, the key wasn't emotional outbursts but honesty and clarity. Just 5 minutes before going live, his assistant popped in. "German Oskarovich is already here, charming the journalists. Seems confident." Belousov chuckled softly to himself. Let him smile. The energy in the studio shifted as the show began. Lights and cameras surrounded him, and the director signaled the start. The questions flew like arrows. Without hesitation, he entered the fray, ready to counter the soft-spoken assurances of his counterparts. The discussion on the digital ruble was underway, but the stakes were personal, intimate, and real. "Tell me, German," he interjected, his voice unwavering. "How can we discuss a digital economy when there are villages without proper internet? How can an elderly person receive their pension in digital currency when they can't even use a smartphone?" The room fell into a hush, the uncomfortable silence thick with tension. The host exchanged glances with her guests, taking in the sudden shift. The atmosphere crackled, and Belousov could feel the ripple effect of his words. Did they truly understand? Did they even care? In a startling scene, the defense minister stormed into the hall, confronting powerful figures and demanding accountability. The atmosphere shifted dramatically as the minister's icy demeanor unveiled the undercurrents of frustration that would soon erupt into an unexpected showdown. Minutes before the confrontation, the air buzzed with anticipation. The camera caught the confident smile of a key economic leader as jokes flitted around the room. Yet, for the minister, this was no casual gathering. He knew that beneath the smooth facade lay systemic flaws that could no longer be ignored. Walking into the room, he didn't just enter, he commanded presence. Every step was deliberate, cutting through the usual pretense. In contrast to the government members engaged in scripted politeness, he exuded a raw authenticity. This was not merely a debate over policies, it was a clash of ideologies, one prioritizing human experience over distractive technological promises. As the presenter shifted the focus to the digital ruble's potential, buzzwords like security and efficiency filled the air. But for the minister, such concepts felt detached from reality. He tuned into the voices of those who were absent, individuals living without internet access, existing in a world devoid of modern conveniences. Their struggles rang in his ears, pressing against the hollow assurances of those surrounding him. Suddenly, he seized his moment. "Excuse me," he interjected. "I just returned from a village where basic services are non-existent. An old man showed me his basic phone and asked, 'Where are my rubles?' Answer that. If you can." The room fell silent, tension crackling like static electricity. The economic leader's initial irritation was quickly masked by a clumsy smile, but the weight of the minister's words lingered. Despite defenses being thrown up, the minister's assertion struck hard. Every individual matters. As long as one person lives without access to healthcare or communication, the lofty plans mean nothing. A murmur of agreement flared among the crowd. Those in the hall began to grapple with an unsettling realization. This wasn't just about futuristic currencies, it was about the tangible lives behind the numbers. While the presenter tried to redirect the conversation towards the potential benefits of monetary reform, frantic whispers filled the space. Those who once felt assured now exchanged glances burdened with doubt. Each question brewing in their minds echoed against the stark contrast of reality that the minister evoked. As the minister calmly reiterated, every region embodies the heart of our nation. The fate of every village and town is intertwined. Without addressing present struggles, we risk building castles in the air. This powerful statement, free from raised voices but laden with urgency, stirred the crowd, some nodding in silent acknowledgement, others holding on to their disbelief. Amidst continued applause, the minister retained his composure. He wasn't celebrating a personal victory. He understood that a deeper struggle lay ahead, one fueled by the pressing need for a major shift in perspective. The applause, rising and falling, reflected not just approval but a shared hunger for truth, as though for the first time, a voice was heard amid bureaucratic noise. As conversations veered toward a more realistic approach, the minister took a moment to gather his thoughts, reflecting on what truly mattered, the lives affected by policies made in distant offices. He sat silently, contemplating a world where numbers meant more than just statistics, where the economic pulse of a nation was felt in the hands of its oldest citizens holding on to fragile bills. In the hallway, as colleagues emerged from the hall, tensions were palpable. The air crackled with unease as some wore their displeasure openly, diving into hasty discussions, while others plastered forced expressions of nonchalance over unmistakable worries. Yet the minister remained unperturbed, his presence steady, knowing the fight for the soul of the nation was far from over. Prepared to face the aftermath, he realized the importance of this moment. Real change stemmed from engagement with the hardships that had been swept aside. This conversation was merely a beginning, a single turn in a longer, unfolding narrative that demanded resilience from those daring enough to challenge the status quo. A single question shattered the polished conference room. What if a defense chief, used to battlefields and bulletproof reports, decided to dismantle a glittering digital currency showcase in front of the nation's top economists? Would the walls tremble, the cameras catch a new kind of courage, or would the speakers simply tighten their ties and smile? The answer arrived in a voice that cut through the hum of air conditioners like a rifle shot. Earlier, Andrei Belousov stormed the meeting not with a grand entrance but with a quiet, determined step. He chose a side seat, dark suit crisp, eyes like polished stone, and listened as Hermann Greff launched a flashy presentation on the digital ruble. Slides flickered, promising a cash-free future, while Valentina Matvienko clapped in rhythm with the theater-like applause. The room smelled of coffee, paper, and confident ambition. Greff's voice boomed, "We must shift to a new model, pensions paid directly in digital rubles, safe, transparent, paper-free." He waved at China, praising its rapid digitization. Matvienko's smile widened, her eyes glittering with the prospect of modernity. The audience murmured, pens scratching, some whispering about retrograde shops on the outskirts. Belousov felt a sting of irritation. Numbers and graphs floated around him, yet his mind returned to soldiers in field hospitals, to elderly grandparents waiting for a single loaf. He rose, hands clasped, and the room fell into a sudden, expectant hush. All heads turned, the air thickening like smog. "Enough," he said, voice low but reaching every ear. "Valentina Ivanovna. Herman Oskarovich, you speak of China's digital miracles, but do you know that corruption can earn a death sentence, that a family may be charged 8 yuan for 2 bullets?" His words struck like bullets, though his tone stayed calm. The audience froze, Matvienko's smile cracked, Greff's eyes darted away. Belousov stepped closer. "Before you push a digital ruble into villages, ask yourself, how does a grandmother with a button phone receive a pension? How does a farmer reach a bank 20 kilometers away? You sell a future while the present starves." Silence pressed down, heavy as a bell. Then the room exploded, not with formal applause, but with raw, genuine clapping. People rose, some still standing, eyes shining with a newfound resolve. Belousov did not grin, he simply nodded, acknowledging the moment as another battle won, yet aware that many more lay ahead. The applause ebbed, leaving a lingering buzz. Greff's jaw clenched, his usually confident face darkening. Matvienko's applause grew quieter, her smile now tight. The cameras captured faces, relief, hope, determination, while the presenters sat, their arguments reduced to pale paper. Belousov returned to his seat, leaned back, and closed his eyes for a heartbeat. He saw, not the sterile charts, but a cracked road in a remote village, a school with broken windows, a doctor's empty desk. He remembered an old woman holding a torn 100-ruble note, whispering, "This is my wealth, son." She did not need a digital coin, she needed bread, a road, a doctor. He opened his eyes. No anger, no fatigue, only steady resolve. He knew officials might dismiss his words as emotional, but somewhere in the crowd, a seed had been planted. The screen behind flickered, graph slides now looking like empty pictures without life. The state exists for its people, Belousov murmured, voice steadier than before. If it forgets this, it ceases to be a state. The room fell silent once more, the weight of his truth sinking into the walls. As the session finally dissolved, journalists swarmed, microphones thrust forward. Belousov shrugged, I said my piece on air. Now the next chapter belongs to you. He stepped out into the biting Moscow wind, the cold biting his cheeks, while reporters shouted questions. He turned, looked back at the hall, and whispered to himself, what will happen when the digital promise meets the reality of a distant village? The answer lingered in the empty seats, waiting for the next move. In the aftermath of a riveting public debate, the atmosphere in the studio was electric. It felt as if everyone had witnessed a moment that would be etched in history. As Andrei Romovich Belousov stepped outside, the brisk Moscow wind greeted him, a stark contrast to the heated discussions that had just unfolded. A swarm of journalists surged forward, microphones thrusting into his personal space, eager for his insights. With a steady demeanor, Belousov simply replied, I have said everything during the broadcast. The next steps are in your hands. He moved through the crowd with quiet confidence, embodying the spirit of a man who had just fulfilled a crucial duty. As he walked, he reflected on the weight of his words. He had cast light on the struggles of ordinary people, resonating with a truth that had long lain dormant. Every hand that had raised in applause felt like a silent acknowledgement, change was necessary, and he had sparked the conversation that might ignite it. Yet, the implications of his statements lingered in the air like the chill of the wind. Walking past the gathering throng, he felt a mixture of triumph and trepidation. Would his bold proclamations lead to action, or would they be brushed aside, lost in the bureaucratic maze of discussions? He thought of the villagers without proper health care, the elderly clinging to their outdated phones, yearning for connection in a digital age that seemed to forget them. But he could not dwell on uncertainties. Belousov knew that the path ahead would be rife with challenges. Powerful figures in the economic sphere would not gracefully accept being confronted. He had made enemies that day, yet he had also ignited hope among the masses. Suddenly, a voice broke through the noise, Mr. Belousov. A young woman stepped forward, determination gleaming in her eyes. You spoke for us. What now? Can we count on you? Belousov stopped, met her gaze firmly, and nodded slowly. The conviction in his response seemed to reassure a few others nearby, emboldening them to speak up as well. Voices began to rise, questions of what he would do next echoing through the crowd. The moment felt electric, charged with possibility. It was a reminder that sometimes, a single voice could resonate far beyond the walls of the chamber, ripple through the streets, and become a beacon for those yearning for change. And as he continued on, he realized that this was just the beginning. The weight of responsibility settled heavily upon his shoulders. Would he be able to shift the tide, or would his endeavors face swift opposition? In that fleeting moment, the energy transformed from mere conversation to potential action. The journey ahead promised to confront not just the bureaucratic systems in place but also the very heart and soul of the nation. His last thought before merging back into the throng was simple yet profound. The battle for a better future was far from over, and he was ready to lead it. A startling question lingers. What happens when a defense minister shatters a polished boardroom with the raw pulse of a rural village? The previous scene played out in messengers. An elderly hand lifted a battered button phone and declared, "This is my number." Viewers laughed, felt bitter truth, and wrote, "A true minister who speaks plainly." Channel split in half. Now the story deepens. Some called Belousov the last honest bureaucrat, others sneered. A populace tried to cash in on the surge, yet the heart of the tale stayed with the people. Their conversations drifted from bread prices to his name. At tiny bus stops, women traded his words like weather gossip. Teachers in modest schools repeated, "Without roads and internet, a digital ruble is useless." In Moscow, a different rhythm echoed. In a sleek cafe, a manager stirred coffee and muttered, "Nice speech, but politics rarely changes." Another replied, "Are you sure? Look at the crowd's fire." Such videos are rare. Even soldiers felt the tremor. Near Tver, officers whispered, "Our minister thinks beyond weapons, perhaps something will work." Meanwhile, life in Lipovtsy marched on, until a week later engineers appeared, dragging cables, erecting an antenna. No clear order was given, yet everyone sensed the echo of Belousov's visit. The same teacher, tired of ancient computers, posted at dusk, "Today the school finally streamed a lesson with stable internet." Children accessed an online library. Not a miracle, just a long overdue promise. Oddly, it took a defense chief, not an education minister, to spark this change. The post exploded with hundreds of comments and shares. Regional news began to utter Belousov more often. To some, he became a hero, to others, an uncomfortable truth-teller. One thing was crystal clear, he turned into the symbol of a conversation the nation had waited for. He read the reports calmly, feeling no triumph, only fatigue and firm resolve. The road back vanished. A brief pause follows the clamor. The air in the hall still holds the lingering smell of stale coffee and the faint hum of the projector. A senator rose, voice edged with steel, to pose the first open rebuke. What will the Federation's elders answer when the minister's challenge pierces their rehearsed scripts? The next moment hangs, a question poised on the brink of a new chapter. A sudden, unheard-of clash erupted inside the nation's most guarded meeting room 5 minutes ago. What could drive a defense chief to burst through a door and silence two of the country's most powerful technocrats in a single breath? How many hidden wars are being fought on polished conference tables, where the only weapons are facts, fury, and an unyielding stare? The answer will leave every watcher re-examining the balance of power. Earlier, the scene was set in a hall scented with fresh paper, brewed coffee, and the faint metallic hint of ambition. The minister, Andrei Romovich Belousov, did not announce his arrival with pomp. He slipped through the doorway like a silent tide, his steps a blend of military precision and the soft tread of a lifelong economist. Officials, accustomed to rehearsed greetings, froze their tablets and forced smiles for just a heartbeat. In that moment, the room's atmosphere shifted from routine to charged electricity. Belousov chose a seat off to the side, his dark gray suit sharply cut, his expression carved from stone. High forehead, narrowed eyes that seemed to catalogue every hidden agenda, a faint, ironic twist at his lips. He listened as the air buzzed with the rustle of pages. Hermann Greb, ever vigorous, launched into a sleek presentation on the digital ruble, his slides flashing like a gadget advertisement. The numbers danced, promising seamless payments for retirees, a flawless, paper-free future. Valentina Matvienko sat nearby, clapping in rhythm, her applause echoing like a theater's curtain call. A cold wave of irritation rose inside Belousov. He knew economics inside out, but his recent months in the defense ministry taught him a harsher truth. War is not measured in spreadsheets, it is measured in lives, in mothers waiting for aid, in soldiers bearing invisible scars. The digital dream being sold ignored the crumbling villages where signal towers barely whispered, where elders still clutched battered ruble notes. Suddenly, Belousov rose. The room hushed as if the very walls inhaled. "Enough," he said, his voice low but cutting through the murmurs. "Valentina Ivanovna, Hermann Oskarovich, you speak of China's flawless digital transformation, yet you ignore the bleak reality of our own remote hamlets. How can a pensioner with a button phone receive a digital payment when the nearest ATM lies 20 kilometers away? You boast of progress, but you stand on foundations of sand." His words struck like quiet gunfire, each syllable echoing in the stunned silence. The audience felt the weight of his challenge. Greb's confident smile faltered, his hands trembled for a fraction. Matvienko's forced grin cracked, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her eyes. A thunderous, genuine applause then erupted, not the polite clapping of politicians but a raw, standing ovation from those who finally heard a voice that mirrored their hidden fears. That thunder of applause became a wave, rising, falling, then surging again as the hall filled with a collective sigh of relief. The guarded officials sensed a shift, a crack in the armor of rehearsed speeches. The minister, still standing, let the sound settle before speaking again, softer now, yet more persuasive. We cannot launch a digital empire on the backs of those who cannot even access a simple bank, he warned. First, we bring broadband to the countryside, provide basic devices, ensure every elder can buy bread tomorrow. Only then will the digital ruble be more than a glossy promise. His appeal left the room in thoughtful murmurs, eyes darting toward the exit, minds wrestling with the stark contrast between glossy charts and the stark, cold reality of forgotten villages. Belousov returned to his seat, eyes lingering on the flickering slides that now seemed hollow, their numbers stripped of humanity. He whispered to himself, economics without people is just a game for the few. The meeting finally drew to a close, the participants filing out with a newfound unease, some masking it with strained smiles, others with clenched jaws. As the doors opened, a young aide approached, breathless, tablet in hand, urging Belousov to commend his boldness, to tell the public how he had set the record straight. Belousov smiled faintly, replying, "The people will notice when their lives improve, not when we count them on a screen." He turned, his footsteps echoing on the marble floor like a metronome, each step a reminder that true power lies not in polished slides, but in the quiet resolve to protect the vulnerable. The story hangs in the air, waiting for the next act, as the echoes of his words linger, demanding change. In a stunning moment just 5 minutes ago, a fervent confrontation erupted in the nation's most fortified meeting space. What could compel a defense minister to burst through the door and silence two of the nation's most influential technocrats in an instant? What hidden battles unfold in these polished conference rooms, where the only weapons are sharp words, intense emotions, and steely gazes? This incident has triggered a seismic shift in the balance of power. The stage was set with the scent of fresh paper, brewed coffee, and a whiff of ambition that hung heavily in the air. Andrei Romovich Belousov made his entrance not with fanfare but like an unstoppable wave, his strides a blend of military precision and the quiet footsteps of a seasoned economist. Government officials, so accustomed to formalities, briefly halted their tablet distractions, eyes wide, as a palpable tension replaced their rehearsed politeness. Taking a seat off to the side, he commanded attention without demanding it. Clad in a sharply tailored dark gray suit, his features were chiseled, high forehead, eyes that seemed to dissect every hidden agenda, and a trace of irony on his lips. He listened intently as the air buzzed with the rustling of documents. Hermann Greb, full of energy, launched into an impressive presentation about the digital ruble, his slides flashing like a tech advertisement promising a paperless utopia with seamless payment systems for retirees. Valentina Matvienko, seated nearby, clapped enthusiastically, her applause echoing like a theatrical performance. Yet, irritation simmered within Belousov. After months in the defense ministry, he understood a harsh reality: war is not calculated on spreadsheets, it is measured in real lives, in mothers anxiously waiting for aid, in soldiers bearing invisible scars. The digital dreams being sold ignored the dilapidated villages where signal towers barely connected, where elders clung to worn ruble notes filled with desperate hope. And then, in a decisive moment, Belousov stood. A palpable hush swept across the room, as if even the walls were holding their breath. "Enough," he declared, his voice low yet piercing through the ambient murmur. "Valentina Ivanovna, Hermann Oskarovich, while you extol the virtues of China's digital triumph, you overlook the harsh truth within our own forgotten hamlets. How can an elderly pensioner with a basic phone access a digital payment when the nearest ATM lies 20 kilometers away? You flaunt progress yet stand upon quicksand." Each word fell like a quiet explosion, reverberating within an astonished audience. The weight behind his challenge hung in the air. Greb's confident facade began to fade, his hands quivered slightly. Matvienko's forced smile faltered, uncertainty flashing across her face. Then, as if a dam had broken, an authentic wave of applause erupted, not the polite clapping of politicians, but a heartfelt standing ovation from those who finally heard someone voice their unspoken fears. This thunderous applause surged, cresting and falling like a collective breath of relief, shaking the complacency of the gathered officials. Standing firm, Belousov allowed the clamor to ebb before he continued, now softer, but undeniably more persuasive. Launching a digital empire cannot be built upon those who lack access to the simplest banking services, he insisted. Let's first ensure broadband reaches our rural areas and provide basic devices. Only then can every elder confidently know they can buy bread tomorrow. Only then can the digital ruble transform from a glossy dream to a tangible reality. His earnest appeal left a murmur of reflection in the room. Eyes darted towards exits, minds wrestling with the dissonance between embellished charts and the bitter reality of neglected villages. As Belousov reclaimed his seat, he stared at the flickering slides, which now appeared devoid of substance, their figures stripped of humanity. He whispered an important realization to himself: economics that excludes people is merely a game for the privileged few. The meeting drew to a close, and as officials departed, the mood had shifted. Some masked their unease with overly strained smiles, others wore tight expressions of displeasure. Finally, a young aide raced toward him, breathless and clutching a tablet. "Minister Andrei Romovich, your delivery today was impeccable. You truly put them in their places, they'll remember this. The public will appreciate your boldness." Belousov offered a faint smile in response. "The people will notice real change in their lives, not simply what we tally on a screen." He turned and walked away, his footsteps resonating softly against the marble floor, each step a reminder that genuine power rests not in polished presentations, but within the steadfast resolve to protect those who are vulnerable. The air was thick with expectation, buzzing with the lingering echoes of his words, demanding lasting transformation.